Welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be sharing some possible FPL chip strategies with you from now until the end of the season. Firstly, I just want to bring this graphic to your attention. I didn't make this and unfortunately I don't know who to give credit to, but basically what it shows is the likelihood of teams blanking and doubling between now and the end of the season. So the number 1 represents 1 fixture for that game week, the number 2 represents 2 fixtures, and the number 0 represents 0 fixtures. If a team has a number between 1 and 2, for example 1.53, it means that that team has a 53% chance of having 2 fixtures in that week, whereas a number between 0 and 1, for example 0.47, means that that team has a 47% chance of only having 1 fixture that week. Put very simply, a number closer to 2 means a higher chance of a double game week for that team, and a number closer to 0 means a higher chance for a blank game week for that team. I'll show you guys the most likely teams to double and blank in the bottom right corner of this video as I discuss various chip strategies. Please remember before we start that there are FA Cup fixtures taking place on February the 28th and March the 1st, and the outcome of these games will have an impact on whether teams double or blank in future game weeks, so please keep an eye out on the official Premier League site or their social medias to keep up to date. Now, if you still have the triple captain chip available, either consider using it in a game week where just a few favourable teams double, or save it for game week 37 or even game week 34 if you're not planning on using any other chips then. Take into account other cup competitions that teams might feature in to avoid the possibility of your captain not playing both of the games in that game week. However, because many of you don't have the triple captain chip left, this video I'll be covering a combination of the other 3 chips: bench boost, free hit and the wildcard. Now for those of you with a wildcard, free hit and bench boost, if you're unable to field 8 or 9 players for the blank game week 28, then you could consider free hitting in game week 28. Game week 29 will be the biggest double of the season, so it could be a sensible time to play a bench boost. Seeing as teams like Brighton and Brentford double in both 27 and 29, you could bring in their assets early on a wildcard. So you would wildcard in 27, free hit in 28, and bench boost in 29. If you were to have 8 or 9 playing players for blank game week 28, then you could wildcard in game week 29, free hit in game week 32, and bench boost in game week 34. This strategy means you'll be able to target the largest double game week 29, with the best players, not have to worry about the likely final blank game week of the season, game week 32, and bench boost in another decent sized double game week 34. Another option would be to free hit in blank game week 28, and if your team is set up well for the following week, then bench boost in game week 29. Once game week 29 is concluded, you could then use free transfers to plan for the likely blank game week in 32, dead end your team in that week, and then wildcard in game week 33, having an eye on both double game weeks in 34 and 37. So for those of you with a wildcard and bench boost, the first option would be to consider wildcarding in the largest double game week 29, to target the best starting 11 for that week. It would also be beneficial to select bench players on your wildcard who double in either game week 34 or 37. Then obviously the bench boost would come into play in either game week 34 or 37. 34 is probably the better week to use it, as it's closer to your wildcard and it'll also be the bigger double. If your team is already looking strong for double game week 29, then you could bench boost in that week and save the wildcard for a later date. My first thought would be to dead end your team into the likely blank game week 32 and then wildcard in game week 33. That way you don't have to worry about blanks and can target doubles and favourable fixtures from now until the end of the season. So for those of you with a wildcard and free hit available, if you're unable to get to 8 or 9 players for blank game week 28, then consider free hitting in 28 and then wildcarding the following week to make the most of the largest double of the season, game week 29. That way you can target the best players for that week, but then also target those players with favourable fixtures for the rest of the season. If you're able to field 8 to 9 players for blank game week 28, you could dead end your team in 28 and then wildcard in 29 to make the most of the chip by targeting players with good fixtures from now until the end of the season. The free hit chip will probably be most useful to activate in the likely blank game week 32, because then you don't have to worry about blanks with your game week 29 wildcard. An alternative strategy if you wanted to wildcard earlier in the season would be to wildcard in the small double game week 27 and then free hit the following week in game week 28 to completely eliminate the worry of not having enough players for that week. With such a large double game week in 29, you could load up on players from teams who double in both game weeks, like Brighton and Brentford. So for those of you with a free hit and bench boost available, if you can't field 8 to 9 players for blank game week 28, then you could consider free hitting that week and then bench boosting the following week, game week 29, for the biggest double game week of the season. Another option is if you can navigate the blank game week 28 with free transfers, then I would consider saving the free hit chip for a smaller blank game week in 32. With regards to the bench boost, I would still consider it for double game week 29, or if you feel your team is well prepared for both the blank game weeks in 28 and 32, then you could utilise both the free hit chip and bench boost for double game weeks. You could pick which chip to use for a mix of double game weeks 29, 34 or 37. If your bench players have good fixtures that week, then bench boost, whereas if most of your team have unfavourable fixtures that week, then choose to free hit. I just want to quickly jump in and ask, if you're enjoying the video so far and getting some use out of it, would you kindly drop a like and share it with whoever you think might find it helpful, as a lot of thought and time has gone into making this one. Cheers guys. So now moving on to those of you who just have a wild card remaining. So first option is to try to get out 8 or 9 players for game week 28, and then wildcard straight afterwards in game week 29. That way you can target the best players in the largest double game week and then be prepared for the other double game weeks later on in the season. Another option is to use your free transfers now to plan for the likely blank game week in 32. If you did this, you could dead end your team in 32 and then wildcard straight away into a fresh team in game week 33 to attack the double game weeks in both 34 and 37, and also target teams with favourable fixture runs from game week 33 to game week 38. So I just want to insert a quick note, and that is to say that using the wildcard later than game week 33 probably won't harvest the maximum benefits from the chip, and using it before game week 29 will cause you to have to navigate blank game weeks with transfers from now until the end of the season. The only exception is of course for those of you who still have your free hit chip remaining. So now for those of you with just a bench boost remaining, the largest double game week will be in game week 29, so it's probably worth using the bench boost then, as most of your bench players will likely have 2 fixtures. However, if your players don't have favourable fixtures in game week 29, then another option could be to save the bench boost for either game week 34, which is likely to be the next biggest game week, or even game week 37, which will be the 3rd biggest game week. It might be beneficial to use free transfers to set up your team for this scenario. And for those of you with just a free hit chip, if you can't field 8 or 9 players for game week 28, then consider using it to take advantage of the best players in that game week and target the easiest fixtures. Another option is if you can get a good number of players out for game week 28, then hold the free hit and consider saving it for the likely blank game week 32. That way you can focus on building your squad with players who have doubles from now until the end of the season with free transfers. Another alternative is if your team looks like it's well equipped for both blank game week 28 and 32, then consider using the free hit in the largest double game week, game week 29. So another thing we'll need to consider is which teams to target based on which chip we're activating and in what game week. So in this next section, I'll briefly be discussing favourable teams to target players from when using the free hit chip and the wildcard. Starting with the free hit. If you were to use it in game week 28, the top 5 teams I'd look to target players from would be Arsenal, Chelsea, Aston Villa, Newcastle and Nottingham Forest. If you were to use the free hit in Gameweek 32, the top 5 teams I'd look to target players from would be Liverpool, Brentford, Everton, Bournemouth and Crystal Palace. Finally, if you use the free hit in the biggest double game week, Gameweek 29, the top 5 teams I'd look to target players from would be Leicester, Brighton, Chelsea, Man United and Newcastle. When it comes to the wildcard, if you were to activate it in the double game week 29, the top 5 teams I'd look to target players from would be Leicester, Man United, Brentford, Chelsea and Liverpool. Finally, if you were to wildcard in game week 33, the top 5 teams I'd look to target players from would be Newcastle, Brighton, Brentford, Leicester and Manchester City. Obviously, when it comes to the top teams in the league, you'll always want to have at least a couple of their assets in your team. But these teams here are my personal favourites when it comes to easiness of fixture, either in a given game week when using the free hit, or over a 3 to 4 fixture period following activation of the wildcard. Remember to keep a close eye on future fixture announcements and when teams will double or blank. At the end of February and the beginning of March, there are FA Cup matches that will determine when future Premier League fixtures are scheduled for, so make sure to hold off on using chips until you have all the information you need to make the best decision possible. Thank you so much for watching guys, and if you do have any questions of your own or comments regarding chip strategy, then drop them down below and I'll try my best to get back to as many of you as possible. Take care and I'll see you again soon.